has given me the most arduous task of engaging all of you right after lunch. But the good news is we're going to talk about customer. I think the more we talk about the customer, I think the greater good it is for the industry. So, without further ado, I think we've got 30 minutes to talk through it. I'm going to kind of very quickly introduce the panelists here, and then we'll probably get cracking on. So to my right is Otbert Jong, CEO of Insurance Market here in Singapore. Luciano Pezzotta, founder and partner, DigitalTech International. You heard him speak before. Grégoire, Rastoul, founder UEX. Pretty impressed with their authentication services that Grégoire was talking about. And to his right is Robert Zepeda, CEO of Playbasis. So why don't we get started with probably a much more broad question, and I'll probably start here with you, Robert. I think in the discussions in the morning, we spoke a lot about how the world of customer has changed. I think Luciano put up a show of hands on how many of us are social, how many of us use mobile phones, so on and so forth. In your opinion, what do you think has actually changed with the insurance customer?
First, let's define that we're talking about Singapore here. And if we look at Singapore customers, I think we all know that most of the insurances are still sold through agents. But obviously, you see changes in the market here now too. In my estimate, Europe is probably about 10 years ahead in terms of kind of online buying. But you can see the trend picking up now here in Singapore. You saw the stats from Bain this morning. So I think we're going to get a customer that has a bigger voice than it used to have. And it should have a bigger voice because it's getting shortchanged at the moment. But we'll talk about it a little bit more later, I guess. Yeah.
Great. And Luciano, just I think want to pick up on that thread on the Singaporean customer being very different than the European customer. And given your sort of global experience of working both in Europe and here in Asia, what could probably be sort of 2 or 3 points that you think is different about the Asian customers that you probably noticed in Europe?
What I noticed, which is really striking, is the willingness to accept new technologies and mobile technologies by local customers. It's really amazing how you never hear any debate, any possible challenge to the entry of the disruptive models that in Europe create strike and make the news. However, I'd like to stress on a more high level how technologies are impacting the customer on a higher level, as desktop internet taught consumers they can access information and services 24/7, anytime they like. And then we got social media that taught consumers they could enjoy information and services and share their experiences with friends and family members. And now we have mobile, where consumers can access information and services anytime they like. They can share their experiences anywhere they like. So I think the combination of these 3 elements is creating really disruptive opportunities that, however, in the insurance sector are still to be developed in meaningful and practical solutions that however, face the challenge of the other industries that are far ahead. We've seen before in the presentation from Michael on gamification, what the gaming industry is an industry that a bit far ahead in adopting those logics are already doing. So we need to face a situation where the expectations are great, possibilities are limitless, and we face the challenge of adapting those technologies to the different product areas. Because what can be done in health is very different to what can be done in car and what can be done in home. If we just look at health, we have 3 macro areas that are really overwhelming in terms of possibilities. We can work on the behavioral steering, on the lifestyle engagement, on this area, which alone has hundreds of possible solutions to engage and deliver value to the customers. And then we have the delivery of medical services, which is another major area where we haven't seen anything yet when it comes to telemedicine, for instance. And then we have the area of driving access to healthcare, where from a micro as well as a macro standpoint, the possibility to create efficiency and provide exceptional value for the customers are huge. So I believe it's a great time with great possibilities, but when we're facing also very high expectations.
Great. Probably picking on the themes that both of you spoke about, as well as some of the sort of participants spoke in the morning. And just at the risk of simplifying this, there are probably three types of customers, digitally speaking, right? So there are digital natives, people who are completely digital, sort of born into the era. People call it millennial era, or even some of the older generations, are quite digital. There is the hybrid, sort of generation who like mobile, but also kind of like some of the other physical channels, particularly when you talk about across the entire customer journey, across the different lines of products that insurers can sell. And then you've got the dinosaurs, who are probably a lot more non-digital in the nature at which, you can do things. Probably a question to Robert, to start with, and to kind of get your sense on, what is your views about, does insurers need to focus on one versus the others? Or do you think that, in essence, having a much more broader strategy targeted at all three of them would help the cause of the insurance industry as more broadly?
Well, speaking as a millennial myself, I think I'm just on the cusp of that, having been born in 1984. But that was a very significant time, because that's when essentially we were the first generation to have completely grown up with video games in the world. So if you think about as a kid, you do your homework, you can play your games. You eat your healthy food, you can play. You do your chores, you can play. So there's always this sort of incentive, and I think we've been raised on this sort of like, you've got to earn, but then you look forward to that. And I think if companies start understanding how they can market to these types of people more effectively, they'll do better in the long term, because millennials are probably the most important customer segment existentially for anyone in this room, because it's going to become, it already is the dominant segment of the workforce. These are going to be your customers. You're selling life insurance policies. You want to have relationships with from now until the next 50 years. So you got to start here. I think that's where you should start.
Great thought. Grégoire, your views?
Yes. My answer would be really more basic, because we talk about customer, and I totally agree on the fact that it really depends on what you sell. The fact is, expectation of a customer is really higher today on any market, I think. And question is, you kind of imply like it's only about digital native or things like that, which is, I don't think it's the case. The question is, what do you buy, and what's the levels of services you want? And when you talk about travel, yes, definitely digital native can easily wants to buy it very quickly, because you find the profile and it's easy, and something like you want it to go fast. When we talk about health insurance, I think human still present. Yes, people want to it easy, so to be easy, you have to use a digital tool. But on the other hand, you have to focus also on human, and I think customers are still very attached to the advisory. You can advise him differently, you can use different tools, but advice and human people is really important. After, it depends on the time you interact with the customer.
Great. So start with the millennial and essentially humanize the experience for all the other segments, behaviorally speaking. And there is a good product / customer mix that needs to be considered while you're designing these solutions. I think valid points.
Don't you think what you say about this is really relevant? Because it really depends. Today we are able to segment very clearly the customer. It really depends on what you need, on what you want. And so my question is, when we start to say millennium, I mean, a biker in Singapore is not a biker in Europe, and potentially a biker in Singapore could be a really high level who's doing competition. And my point is, we have a large range of customer, and the tool we have is good, but I think it's really difficult when you start talking about customer. I'm in charge of expatriate insurance, and I'm doing only expatriate insurance because I think I cannot do more for the moment, because there is several needs for this customer. and the needs are not the same when you talk about another one. So I think if we want to define it, it's too easy to say how is the customer. We should go further inside.
I think that's great points. I think that kind of leads me on to the next question around the needs, so to speak. Probably picking on both of you, to reflect, what do you think are probably the top 3 needs, of it? Sort of again going by, you can pick a couple of sort of, product areas that you probably want to talk about. Potentially, auto, given your experience with auto more recently, from an insurance customer.
Yeah, I think it's all about personalization. When we think of customers, I think in general, when the industry thinks of customers, they think of customers as commodity. But everybody is different. Everybody has different needs at different moments in their life. And that can be at different ages and different family circumstances, different levels of wealth. Stuff that needs to be insured by one person doesn't necessarily need to be insured by another person. So taking an interest in who your customer is and what that customer needs, I guess, is a good first step to take. Then the second step, of course, is then, okay, can we help? And how can we help? And how can we create a distribution mechanism that fills that gap between what a customer actually needs and what it is that the insurance company provides. And the insurance companies need to think very hard, I think, whether they want to be kind of a solution to everything for a customer or whether they should actually specialize. I think it's very difficult. I mean, there's so much insurance to be done. It'll be very difficult to do everything to your customer. So perhaps you also need to accept that as an insurance company, there might be some value in you specializing in a particular type of risk or in a particular stage of life. So further specialization really aimed at filling that customer need. And for that, of course, you need to get to know a lot about your customers.
That's I think it's a great point. I think I'll probably, question to Robert just on the last point about getting to know more about your customers. Are there any, sort of techniques that, you have come across in, your sort of gamification background that'd be worthwhile kind of exploring a little bit on?
Absolutely. So I'll just throw some concepts out there, but, you could profile people just on how they play a game, right? Because people that may be more aggressive in a game might also have more aggressive tendencies in how they drive cars or how they, choose strategies. People who are more passive may also, there's a reflection of the personality that gets portrayed when they play a game. And I think we also talk about like we're always, I think sometimes insurers are always positioning themselves as we have what you need, but these guys also, they don't know what they need. And a lot of times these millennials, they don't think they need it because they're not buying assets, they're underinsured, they're not even driving their own cars anymore. They're working, freelance. So it's like, what's the definition of need? It's different now. So we have to ask them, what do they need? And we have to educate them on, hey, by the way, did you know this is possible? Did you know that if you combine all of these policies, you can do this? Did you know that a life insurance policy could have some yield for you? Did you know any of this stuff? And a lot of people, they don't know that. So that's part of it. Before we understand what they're, trying to solve their needs right now, we've got to really understand what are their needs today. And they're not having kids, they're not getting married. So, now all of a sudden family life and those kinds of things are a little bit less important. And, God, I hate this term, but YOLO, you only live once. So if you're a YOLO guy, you're not really thinking about life insurance. So it's just different.
I think you had some thoughts.
Yeah, I was going to react to that a little bit. It is really about, for every customer, for every individual in life, it is about managing your financial risks properly. So yes, you can insure everything, but perhaps you don't want to insure everything. So it's not so much that I think also millennial isn't aware that there is insurance out there. He's perhaps not aware of the risk, but I think not even that is the case. He needs to take a decision, where his pain threshold is going to be. If I lose my phone and it's going to cost me $1,000, is that something that I can afford? So for every individual, you have to find that pain threshold. What are the risks basically that somebody is facing, and which risks can he assume or she assume, him or herself, and which are the ones that you have to lay off. I mean, that's the way it goes in risk management, and this then needs to This is something that people have to do at a personal level. But I think the way of going about it is just make them financially responsible. And I think kids these days, it's part of their curriculum to become financially responsible. I think the older people need a little bit more help with that. But I think the youngsters are probably quite good at it. Yeah.
Okay. Just kind of moving on from much more focused on product needs to, we spoke a lot about customer experience and trying to sort of solve for customer experiential pain points a lot more holistically as an insurer. What do you think are absolute basics, and what are some of the differentiating aspects from a customer experience standpoint? So as an example, would mobile claims-oriented capability is a lot better than helping post car crash? It's just an open thought. And what do you think? Obviously there's a spectrum on basic things that needs to be fixed, like some of the examples that we spoke about in the first half, and obviously some of the other aspects around ecosystem, IoT-oriented, data-oriented place. But just reactions on that.
Yes. If I knew exactly what's the best customer experience, I think I would be very, very rich. I think there is very various way of customer experience. I love TED Talks I've seen, which is like a designer who explaining, you have a park and you have the path of the park and it's going all around the grass, and you have the MRT station on the other side. And you see the path, and you see like no more grass straight to go directly to the MRT station. What it says, it's we don't know what's the best customer experience until we tested it and we test the usage. So you have to go fast. You should minimize your investment at the beginning and test it and retest it and move and change and rechange it, which is a way of doing, I think. And you don't have, at the time you start to have some conclusion or knowledge and you think you know who is the guy because you're also a user, I think that's where you start not to think well. That's very difficult. I'm not doing it every time, but I'm trying to do it every day.
So much more iterative, validated approach towards building what's the right proposition.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Your reactions?
Yeah, my point is, let me share an experience. My father is an avid traveler, and now finally he is quite familiar with the use on the internet. So wherever he goes, he surfaces about the destination, he has his own website, and then when he finds the information, he takes a piece of paper and starts to write down the hints and the places he wants to visit, because that is his mindset. My daughter instead, whenever I get her a new present, a new gadget, whatever, and eventually try to explain how to use it, she looks at me like, "Daddy, get lost. Let me figure it out." So this is basically a major difference that I see in the behavior of the baby boomers as compared to the digital natives. And an important impact of this on the insurance industry is that typically the insurance product is not bought but sold. And as part of the selling process, you have the overwhelming terms and conditions that are part of the traditional experience, and nobody have a challenge because regulatory or because that's the way it is. Everybody is going through the same pain. However, moving forward, I believe as these digital natives going to grow and eventually going to become more aware of the importance to get insured, this is going to be a pain point that has to be addressed. I believe this is going to make a difference when somebody is going to be able to find a solution to that. And the second point is that before, when we were talking about the digital natives, still we're talking about awareness, we're talking them about realizing the importance to start to think about their financial needs, about their longer life management, lifestyle, all these issues that make a lot of sense to me now, but they didn't make a lot of sense to me 20 years ago when I had long hair, I was into rock music, I wanted to do a number of things that luckily I eventually didn't do it, right? So I think one of the opportunities in this case, after the 24/7, anywhere, and shared with everyone, is at the right time what is relevant for you without you making the effort to ask for it. So eventually, this is, rather than a pain point, I see it as a major opportunity for the industry.
Great. I think one final question, probably before we open the floor for taking a couple of questions. Maybe starting with Robert. In the morning, we discussed about how do we amplify the engagement with the customer. Today, an average insurer has 1 or 2 touch points, and you want to increase that to 100. You want to increase that to 1,000, even in a year. So how do you do it? What are some of the initial thoughts? What are some of the learnings from some of the other industries? How can gamification help?
I guess I'm going to sound like a broken record again, but because the thing about games, it's totally opt-in. And people will spend so many hours on their character, on their farm, and they're doing this voluntarily. Like a game is basically a voluntary attempt to go through some arbitrary challenge because it's interesting. And so if it's part of the game to check in every day, to stay top of mind, then a life insurer can now all of a sudden have a much more frequent interaction with their customer than they might normally have. And if you're a millennial, I believe that a lot of we're either forced by insurance, or if we have to deal with a claim, it's a very tragic or otherwise unpleasant experience. So you're basically an industry that's marketing on fear and sadness and all these other things. Let's try fun. Let's try a new way of thinking about how to get people engaged.
Any other thoughts from Grégoire and others?
Well, the way we do it is that we let customers build a profile. So, insurance, at some point, you're going to come across it. It can start with your first travel insurance and you have an incident, or you have to buy your first travel insurance. What we do is that, just like you have your LinkedIn profile, we allow customers to build their insurance profile. This goes across all the insurers. So it doesn't matter which insurance companies you deal with. You have one profile, you've got all your policies in one place. So that'll be a very kind of convenient place for customers to have. And then you can, of course, gamification, I think, is interesting. I mean, it's always fun to play games, but when it comes to insurance and in that way to engage with customers, it may work from time to time. But insurance at the same time, it's a serious business. So you want to make sure you got all your stuff in place, you got it all neatly organized. And at the moment, what you have is a bunch of binders with policies that are of all different shapes and forms. And usually with me, they never fit into my binder for one reason or another. But to have all that organized and have all that in one place. And when your address changes, it gets changed across all your insurance companies. Or when you go through your policies, or it's a change in your family circumstances, and the change is required, you have the overview and you have one place where you can make your changes. So just kind of offering a convenient place to customers where all of that can be done, where you have the total overview and where you can actually manage your insurances, I think will go a long way towards making this threshold towards insurance company a little bit lower.
So gamification, one-stop shop.
Yeah, I just want to really agree on the gamification, to engage with the clients and add just the freedom. Gamification is great because it also brings some education, and I think that's really something really important. Bring some people to think about it, but in a way they use it. It's like a game. Yeah, it's really important, and I think at UX we feel like it's really something we need to do. And we're talking about prevention here. Engage with a guy is maybe not selling at the first time, to be a trusted third party before being the insurance company. You buy your wearable, you don't think about getting your insurance. But if you have a good profile or something, today it's quite difficult to do, but maybe tomorrow we'll be able to do that. So that's kind of it. After, to engage, I think we should trust also the clients. And for example, our application, it's a web application. Why? Because we didn't want to create any blockage before the people start looking at it. So we tried them to, and same, it doesn't have to create any account if it doesn't want to buy. I think that's really important also to people want more and more. Whenever you buy or you download an app today, you have to put your account, you have to do the Facebook thing. And I think this one, some people don't like this kind of thing. So the freedom is really important for me, I think, when you want to engage with the customer.
Great. We probably have 2 minutes for any sort of questions from the customers. On the customers from the audience. They are customers as well, right?
What is the correlation between gamification and Yes, what's the correlation between gamification and the decision of how to sell? Like, what do you look for in a gamification? Values on profiling to sell or to profile?
So I'll give you some of the best examples of how insurance companies could have leveraged gamification. Google. So Google acquired Waze, and in the year that they acquired Waze, they had about some sort of billions of kilometers in that year alone. And so now it's rolling into Google Maps and will be part of the fabric of autonomous driving. And you've collected at a mass scale just by rewarding people with points and making it a game to turn on their phone and track. Okay, Google Pokemon Go is a joint venture with Google and Nintendo. And in 2 months, people have walked 5 billion kilometers. Think about all this data that Google now has. So Google is going to launch Google Insurance. They have to, right? They have all of the data. And basically, this is us. We are a phone. I mean, basically, this is so personalized to us. When I download Facebook and I launch Facebook, I have a different experience than anyone else in here. That is a totally personalized experience product for me only. And that's what I think we should be learning. Let's not compare each other. You know, let's not say we want to be the best insurance app, or let's look at what this insurance company is doing and let's add that in. Look at the best apps, period. The very, very best apps, period. And learn from those guys, not from the other insurers.
How about the pricing?
The pricing, so the nice thing about these types of things is that like people, you don't have to pay people to have fun. So they're willing to do things if it's fun. And the other thing that mobile has done is created this idea of like you can play without having to pay anything. So you can try the product. Then there's opportunities to monetize inside through microtransactions. So I think that's another lesson that a lot of insurers should have, micro policies, which can be purchased for just a short period of time with a tap of a button. Even offer me a trial policy. Give me 1 day free trial of health insurance or life insurance. Right? Like these are very easy things to do. If you just design it like a good game.
I don't know if you heard of, surely about Trove, which basically it's exactly what you say. It's like you enable someone to put your stuff into a place, and you can share it with people. And you have like the last pair of skis. Sorry, I'm from France, so I like to ski in the Alps. But and I like to share it with people. And I create a community, and the Trove is a trusted third party. It's not about selling anything at the beginning. Then, because you have ski or you have your mobile phone, potentially it's important for you. It's the last one. So potentially you want to secure you. But you want to secure in the way you use it. So they give some micro insurance, and that's kind of, I think, really important.
Just to summarize that, I would say kind of like Google considers all of us a customer even if we are not paying for their service. We're still treated as a customer. So I think that's the problem a lot of insurance companies have. It's like if you're not a policyholder, then we don't really want to talk to you until you become one, and that's a lot of friction.
Another question.
Yeah, I wanted to speak, like gamification is one thing, social capital is another. And we talk a lot about social capital. Think about couchsurfing, how it started, right? Where there are self-regulating communities. And the question really is, when gamification encourages you to do things that you want to do, social capital does as well, because we heard about Lemonade. It allows you to care about the people that are in your risk pool. We hear it about sharing insurance based on affinity, which Grégoire is obviously big on. All those things kind of, there's gamification, and then there's sort of the social contract. And I'd be interested in your views of what is your ideas of how to use this social contract that's ingrained in humans and use it in an insurance context? Really interesting to know.
I think on social community is really tricky because, when we started to work on UX, first thing I wanted to be a medical advisor, like a trip advisor of the medical, creating a trusted third party, creating a community, give them a lot of information about what they can do, where they can go at the hospital, and things like that. I think that's the best way to do it, and Trove has done it like this, and create this kind of trust is really important, and I really believe in it. So my point is, I think they are on the social. You talk about Lemonade. My point is really, we were talking about customer. I think social is about getting people who has the same passion or the same need or something, bought by many. For example, you have an heart problem. You cannot take a travel insurance, for example, because there is an exclusion. You want to recruit other people to get a group and go and see an insurance company and say, guys, we're 10,000 now, so we can mutualize the risk. So I think it's really powerful when there is a group, a social community with similar risk profile type of needs, because then you are able to push the insurance company, and sorry for that, but sometimes we have to push insurance company to understand that it can provide insurance for these people because there are 10,000 and we can mutualize it.
Great. I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. So thank you so much, all of you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.